Welcome to Circle of Tone. Today, Mötley Crüe, Mick Mars, legend. You can see me wearing old school death metal t-shirts. People like me who are kind of obsessed with the old underground napalm death and grindcore and old school thrash and the rest of it. All of us guys, I can pretty much speak for everybody. I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about Mick Mars. They will rip apart Mötley Crüe in general, but Mick Mars seems to have this status of that not many people share, where grudging black metal guys will, turn up Mötley Crüe when they're driving, you know what I mean? For one reason, it's not the singing. If you've missed my recent video, I've actually done a video on a review of the movie The Dirt. Check it out. Check out my review after this. Stay here for the entire time. Watch all of the advertisements. Hit like, hit subscribe, and all that shit. Before we start, thanks to my patrons of Tone. Nobody signed up since the last video I've done, so if you can help out the channel, I really appreciate it. But I'll give you guys a shout out if you become a patron of Tone. So, Mick Mars, where to start? Have you seen his gear lists? Everything. Kramer, Flying V's, Berettas, Hamers, bloody BC Rich, Stratocasters, blah, blah, blah. So where do you start? Where do you start? So this video now, I'm going to basically tell you how to get his vibe through the most fundamental bedrocks of his tone. I had to dig so deep because even in the earliest interviews I came across with Mick Mars, he was saying, I don't want to share my information because it's my sound. And here I go fucking up his legacy. But it's videos like these that keep this shit alive. So yes, I'm giving away some of his secrets, but it's a labor of love. And maybe we can inspire you to get away from plugging your guitar into a computer. The main ingredients of his tone that people like, he's gone on and used other stuff like Galen Kruger amps and things like that, but his main amps was late 60s, early 70s Marshall Super Lead Plexis. And they were modded. They were modded by, people say it's a Jose mod, and I'm not sure if Jose did the mods himself. If you look at, just Google Jose Marshall mods. He's a legendary amp tweaker that pretty much was at the forefront of the hair metal, radio metal, thrash, and the rest of it. Because even my Langner modded Marshall kind of, Jose kind of built the bedrock for people like Langner to mod from. So what did he have? He had a master volume mod on these old Marshall Super Lead Plexis, the old four-holers. And he used to have it on the back. So there's a knob on the back, but he also later on had a knob on the front as well. So that, what that tells me is that there's an extra gain stage. So not only did he have he definitely had a master volume mod on the backs of his main amps, but on the front, it looks like an extra gain stage. It was put on there as well. So these are heavily modded Marshalls. But don't despair. Don't despair. Just because you don't have a master volume mod, all you have to do is turn the volume up on the. So this is what it's all about. It's loud. And when he references his sound, he would put his rhythm guitar on 5 out of 10 volume wise, and then for solos he would crank the master volume to 10, and that will give him a lot more saturation for his solos. But I know what you're asking. There is a sound to him which almost sounds like 3D, almost like a chorus, almost like a slapback reverb on it and things like that. Let's get to it. On Shout of the Devil, this is the main album that I'm going to be focusing on, but I'll talk about later years as well later on. But on Shout of the Devil, he would have his Marshall stack. He used to use 2 Marshalls, right? But in this instance, he had 1 Marshall stack in the studio room, close mic'd, okay, with a Neumann U87 microphone, okay? And in the back of the room, he'd have a microphone. Why is there a microphone in the back of the room? That creates slapback reverb. Okay, so the room is reverberating. You're not hearing the detail and the nuances with that. You're hearing the room a little delay later on, and what that creates is phase. So it almost sounds like he has a chorus on, but it's not a chorus. It's actually the phase of the speakers and the room intermingling, and when the front microphone that's right in front of the amp gets picked up first, and the second one gets picked up later. So you're hearing kind of like the note later on, and that creates that chorus effect. But there are other chorus effects that he used, but not in front of his amp. He used to use lexicon effects on the board. So it wouldn't be recorded before the front of the amp like a chorus pedal or whatever. It would be recorded, and then they would put this lexicon on the recorded track. And that makes it a lot cleaner, because these old Marshalls didn't have send and returns. They didn't have, really good options for choruses in front of the amp. Because when you put choruses and delays in front of the amp, it kind of muddies things up. So he would put the echo on the tape, not on the actual amp. This is on the albums. Live, he did have a lexicon on the board, on the live mixing board. He put it there. Even though you'd see it in the rack, it was there for him to twiddle with if he wanted to. But it would actually go through the PA and not into his Marshall. So little tricks like that, because he knows what muddies up his tone, and that's why his tone was also always so great. And it was often one guitar on Shout of the Devil. And the reason you get this space is he would have one side with the close mic, and on the other side he'd have that room verb. So it would kind of sound as if you're being surrounded by Mick Mars' genitalia all over your face. Boom. And I love that sound, that crunchy old Marshall. Now, the internet will tell you that, this is why you come here, right? The internet will tell you that it was a Les Paul custom, early 70s, on all of Shout at the Devil, which is false. Mick Mars would tell little pokey pies throughout all of his interviews because he did not want to share what he used. And I've got some good inside information on this one, from everything from old interviews, and even I questioned his son and the rest of it. But on Shout of the Devil, you can clearly hear through everything, through the rhythm, through the solos, through extra tracks. You can clearly hear a dive bombs up and down. So he actually had quite a lot of different guitars coming in on Shout of the Devil, and they were kind of rented, they were borrowed and things like that. So he actually used stuff like Charvels and Hammers and things like that on that album, and probably a BC Rich as well, because sometimes he gets questioned on the guitars that they're on album covers with, things like that, and he says they're usually props, but the bulk of his tone is the early 70s Les Paul. Early 70s, late 60s super lead, modded master volume. What was it called? The 1959, I think it was. He'd use Marshall cabs. He used to load his cabs with greenbacks as a reference. So I'm going to presume that he used greenbacks on the album. That's what I have mic'd up here. When I heard mine, I was like, that's pretty close. It could be the 65, So what did I do to get my tone that you hear with the Les Paul style guitar. That's my pickup, by the way. If you like that sound, that's my pickup. You can get that for $70 at circleoftone.com. So what I did to get that sound, I actually used two Marshalls. So this is my booth, which is filled with speakers and filled with evil into the pandemonium. So here are the cab. This is the cab that is hooked up to the Langner modded Marshall Plexi. And as you can see, I've got 3 mics on 2 different speakers. They're both the same speaker. One's a 1969 greenback, one's a 1970 greenback. And this here is a large, condenser microphone. And this is the SM57, and this is a ribbon mic. The ribbon mics are great because what they do is it kind of emulates the tape, the warmth of tape. So very cool. So that is my cab. And now down here we have the LPP one, the Electro Harmonics, I think it's called Line Power Boost, something like that. Very cool. And the most important aspect, Marshall number 1. This is the modded Langner, and it's probably going to be the one that's most like his because it has the usual master volume mod plus an extra gain stage, and I do suspect that there's an extra gain stage on Mick Mars's rig. And then down here we have Marshall number 2, and I'm not sure if you can see, but these are his settings, and very cool. And this is the one that's powering the room. So what do I mean by powering the room? Let's go check it out. Mr. Bubs. Death clock. So this is my front room. As you can hear, high ceilings. And this is the microphone. So I got this microphone that is picking up the other 2x12 cab. So let's check that out real quick. So seismic cabinet, really cool value, and basically it's a birch cab and it's really good value as well. And in here I can't go around the back, but I have let's do this. Let's not do that. There is a Celestion Blue Alnicos Blue speaker in there, and there's also a Heritage Greenback in there as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of crap over here because I am trying to put together my own rack. But look how pretty that is. Uh-oh. Oh well. Welcome to Chili's. My gimbal just ran out of juice. Mick Mars would have his number 1 Marshall, the main, the early 70s super lead. So that was his main one, and then he'd have a second one as well for the room. So I've got the Langner one mic'd up in here, close mic'd. And then in the other room, which the other Mars where the plexi is going into, I have another cabinet with greenbacks in it, and my microphone is way back in the room, and that gets that slap effect. On my intro track, I didn't accentuate that aspect, the 3D, the slappy, reverby stuff. So if you listen now, I'm going to take out a few microphones and just put one left and one right, and then you can hear the effect that it has when you overdo the room verb on one of them. his pickup fetish, because he's been through a lot, actually aligns exactly with mine. If my pickup most closely resembles a cross between a PAF and a T-top. In that magical in-between quality is what my pickup is. And his very favorite pickup is an old Gibson T-top. Not the reissues, because they sound different, but the old ways. That's why I use old wire on my hot and ground leads on my pickups. I use new old stock wire on them because I don't trust the copper content on a lot of new production wire, because it's going to be filled with pot metal and it's not going to be as conductive, so that I worry about things like that. Mine are silver tinned, for extra conductivity and to stop it from rusting. I mean, you'd see live images of his rig as well, and he used to have like parametric EQs, he used to have lexicon effects. When he did use chorus effects in the studio, like I say on the board, that was a lexicon. And date-wise, it was probably these models. I know for a fact that he used this model of lexicon slightly later on in his live rig. I think he used a Furman PQ3, which I believe is the dime parametric EQ. So there's a little bit of magic in that. And the funny thing is, they're not really designed for this type of thing. They're actually used for live reinforcement, but they would use what was around at the time, and then you use it, and then all of a sudden it becomes mythical, and then next thing you know, they're $600 for a pretty average parametric EQ. So other choruses that he used as well were actually, say, on Theatre of Pain era, he'd actually use. It was the first album I didn't really like the tone of, and it's because he used a solid state amp on that. He actually used an old Galen Kruger amp, which was the one that I believe Iron Maiden were using that at the time as well. But he still busted out the Marshall. What he would do, he would close mic the Galen Kruger amp, but he would run that amp through his Marshall cabs. And then in another room, which was a very reverb heavy, slappy room, he said it was full of plate glass and lots of wood and things like that. So then his Marshall would be in there for that 3D effect. So the Marshall was still on that Galen Kruger album, but you can tell it sounds a little bit more flat. Not a lot of the tones were great, but that Galen Kruger head has an amazing chorus on there. I was actually researching this recently. I was actually researching what the hell was that chorus that they used to put, the chorus circuit that they used to put in those Galen Kruger heads. I wouldn't mind actually trying to build that and put it in a pedal, because that thing was legit. But yeah, for solid state amps, Galen Kruger did something decent back then. So yeah, the amount of gear that he's gone through. Kramer's, he had this Telly style Kramer for Girls era, and he used to have the Beretta on Dr. Feelgood and Kramer. But still, that Les Paul was probably on all these albums. So if you wanted to get the crux of his sound, all you got to do is you can use two cabs, right, on one head. So you can, if you have two cabinets, the other one could be a 1x12, as long as the ohms match, right? Close mic with a U87 style microphone and an SM57. Throw that in there as well, because he can, you never know. A lot of these guitarists, they tweak their moustaches. They tell Guitar Magazine, yeah, I used a Capri-Sun and an Axe FX. Yeah, sure I did. You know what I mean? And then always in the background is an old school Marshall. I'll tell you. Why do you think I'm surrounded by these things? A lot of the modern amps, they have so many options, so many channels, so many of this. If you open up an amp, you can see the signals going to hell and back. The longer the signal, the more things are going to knock it down and make it fizzly and sizzly and nasty. The shorter, I'm obsessed with the shortest amount of time. That's why I don't have patch bass, because, I don't even want to put cables in the mix. Yeah, a Marshall and a Gibson and something in front now and then, and you're good to go, bro. T-tops. Or if you don't want to buy a $700 T-top set of pickups, you can buy my Circle of Tone pickups for next to nothing. Money. So I think it's around Dr. Feelgood was when the Strats, the Fender Strat started coming into it. So also Charvel's on that, and even PRS was on that album. But you got to remember, when it came to Theatre of Pain era, rewinding a little bit, that was when they went downhill audibly for me. And it shows, I think they got so much success up until Theatre of Pain that they kind of phoned it in. They recorded that thing in so many different studios. They used to use That's when they started using click tracks and recording apart from each other. You know, the drums would be done in one studio, the guitars would be done in a different studio, the bass would be done in another studio. And also they used the Lindrum, which was a drum machine. They started using click tracks and everything. And, you know, there's only a few good songs on that album, you know, the ballads and the things. But for me, so they came back with a bang with Dr. Feelgood. And that's what I love. I mean, their first album was literally tracked in one day. And they actually practically mixed it themselves as well. So it was essentially a glorified demo, but it was so wonderfully rehearsed. They rehearsed every day. They played every night. It was a solid band by the time we got in the studio. And it shows. It shows, you know, Livewire and the rest of it. You cannot deny the energy of these songs. And then Shout at the Devil, they actually spent about 4 months in the studio on that one because, you know, the legend was starting to grow. So they actually spent quite a lot of time on Shout at the Devil. And it's interesting. And still that was tracked, you know, live with the bones of the recordings being done. And then they'd overdub guitars, things like that. And Vince, back then, they'd actually record 3 vocal tracks. So they'd sing the song 3 times and they'd stitch together the good ones. And then that was it. So you wouldn't like nail it first time or whatever. But he got a lot of help from the producer on the vocals. And that's when he started actually thinking about it and not just going hell for leather. So later on, he started going crazy with the racks. He started using the Eventide H3000 and the Lexicon PCM70. If you want to check out detailed pictures of my settings and my mic positions and microphones, things like that, you can check out my Instagram, and I've got lots of footage of it there. And something that doesn't get enough love is Nikki Sixx. I mean, he was heavily involved with writing most of these songs, and also a lot of the riffs. He plays guitar. I mean, most of them played multiple instruments. Even the drummer wrote the piano for Home Sweet Home and things like that. But Nikki Sixx is underrated when it comes to his gear. So let's talk about Nikki Sixx's Thunderous bass rigs. On Shout at the Devil, it was the classic Ampeg SVT rigs, you know, the 8x10s and the 8x10 cabs and the SVT. Those old speakers sound better, by the way, and they blow like crazy. I actually give up on SVT, on the Ampeg 8x10s cabinets in the past because the good speakers are the old ones. But they kept on. They just turned into dust when I used to crank it to a decent level. So that's why I moved on to guitar speakers, actually. But then later on, after that, he moved on to front-loaded 15-inch, still with the Ampeg heads. But he moved on to things like Hamer guitars, where he could design his own a little bit. And he would do things like, he was mentioning things like, this is in early 80s. He was mentioning things like brass nuts and MIDI. He had a MIDI bass in the late 80s. He would mix precision bass and jazz pickups on his own Hamer guitars, you know, his own design guitars. So he was really into the gear. And, you know, the people in the know back then knew that the SVTs were beasts. You know, a lot of people used them. But so he wasn't just a druggy, sex fiend, cocaine and the rest of it. He was actually a hard-nosed musician that knew his stuff. But on the surface, because he was so obsessed with the image aspect, then, you know, people just paint him with this brush. You should check out his channel. He's got this channel where I think it's called Behind the Riff. He's had people like Scott Ian, my hero. He had people like Zakk Wylde on there, all talking about their favorite riffs and, you know, talk about AC/DC and things like that. And he's a good guy, man. Nikki Sixx, I have a lot of respect for him. After the fact, back then, I was like, okay. Go check out Nikki Sixx's channel, and it's Mötley Crüe week, and why not? But yeah, Mick Mars, what a ghost of a man. He hated publicity, you know. They'd have to drag him into photo shoots. He was obsessed with the blues. He is, at his heart, he's a blues man. You should hear him playing some slide. He's an underrated blues guy. And from his first guitar, I keep on seeing this guitar, this Stellar guitar. Some of the old schoolers went, oh, Stellar. It was kind of like those things that you get, the cheapest guitar you could buy in a catalogue, and people would look at it And his first guitar was a Stella guitar that his dad bought him, I think from a junk shop. So we're talking, and then he moved on to greater things. But I wouldn't mind doing a video on Stella, because I'm sure if I Google Stella plus first guitar, I'm sure like there's going to be like 100 different guitarists that started on these bastards. All right, guys, you've been awesome. If you like this type of stuff, we have a Facebook group where we talk about it. They actually helped me out on this video too, so thanks to you guys. And you can share your music. Tell us what techniques you use. Don't just spam your band. And we talk about gear, and if we're having problems with amps and miking and things like that, give suggestions. So it's a cool place. It's just search Circle of Tone on Facebook. And also, we're over 1,000 strong now. It's getting crazy. To become a patron of Tone, all the links are below. I really appreciate if you share it. Nobody really shares old school metal channels. You know, we usually they've got the lowest amount of followers, things like that. So I'd really appreciate if you share this one. And I'll see you next time. And what is happening next time? I don't know.